Quick, put these on! Your voice rung out, and Zenitsu blinked rapidly, his brain struggling to catch up as he hustled after you, trying his best to imitate the feminine foot shuffle he'd seen so many a time, but never felt the need to study so closely before now. It was hard not to trip over this damn kimono, he realized. And this wasn't even one of the formal ones. Not like the ones you just abruptly shoved into his arms. Huh? He gawked down at the thick fabric. But these look heavy. I thought we were going to dance practice. Change of plans, you replied and raked a brush through your hair with heated pace. Not a frantic motion, but one of trained haste. A patron is coming instead. One of our regulars. He didn't give us much notice, but we're preparing to host him now. So that means lessons are canceled today. I see. Patron, the blonde thought bitterly. You meant one of those opulent, undeserving men that were allowed to waltz right in and take advantage of the beautiful women here. Zenitsu's eye twitched involuntarily out of spite. Are you coming? Your voice hailing from farther away made him look up, and he realized he was trailing behind. Oh! You heard Zenko's footsteps tromp loudly on the wood as she ran after you, and you winced. You definitely needed to have her work on that. The girl eyed you carefully, anxiously awaiting further instruction. Your demeanor softened and you slowed down, taking her by the hand. It's okay, Zenko-chan. You flashed a gentle smile. You can help me refill the teapots and stuff. It's really quite simple, so there's no need to be nervous. But I've never done this before. What am I even supposed to say to them? Just to be safe. Until you have more training. For tonight I suggest you only speak when spoken to, and be as polite as you can to the gentlemen and their guests. Don't try and initiate conversation just yet. I guess I can do that. She pursed her lips in thought, and with the curvature of her eyebrows it made it look like she was pouting. Once you have a few lessons, I promise it'll all come naturally. You'll see.
Thank you, she mumbled. That's very comforting.
I'll help you get changed, you offered, and a white-hot streak of panic surged through Zenitsu's body. He couldn't afford to blow his cover this early. Just one glimpse of him without his shirt on, and this Rouge would all be over. No! I've got this covered! The blonde shrieked out at you, that panicked, piercing sound you hoped you'd get used to in time, and launched herself into the room before clacking the door shut. You just catch up on whatever it is you have to do before we start! All right, if you insist, you hollered back before taking your leave. Guess she's shy, you thought, and decided to leave it there. You figured she was more nervous about meeting the guests than she let on. The poor dear. It was apparent that she needed some time to gather her thoughts, and, if the squeaky pitch in her voice was any indication, her composure as well. After hearing your footsteps fade into the distance, Zenitsu sighed. Here he stood, alone, puzzling the layered kimono sitting on the bed. I think I remember how to do this. He was sort of familiar with how an obi was wrapped. He recalled helping his former wife change into one a few years ago, though she probably only made me help her so she could sneak off with that other man. Zenitsu's hand squeezed and wrinkled the fabric, before he remembered himself. No, he couldn't allow bitterness to surge through him and sour his mood. He wouldn't risk shaming you at this event after you'd gone through so much trouble to guide him. If he were to stumble now, the responsibility and consequences would fall upon your shoulders. Instead, he tried to focus on the gentle, warm feeling of your hand in his. That smile of yours that inspired security and comfort. With steadfast resolve, he shamelessly squeezed into that snug little slip and started curling the datejime around his hand for ease of access. Ready, Zenko-chan? The sudden knock on his door and the proximity of your voice made Zenitsu jump. Don't come in! He yelped, briefly considering catapulting himself under the futon to cover his body. Okay, I won't. Ouch. Stupid. Which way does it? Ugh. after a few muffled grunts came from the dressing room, you couldn't help but ask, "Do you need help?"
"Everything's under control! Nothing to see here!"
"Well, all right," you called back, making a face. "Not to rush you, but we really better get a move on." Your new companion thrust the Fusuma open, breathing heavy and possibly sweating.
"Ready!"
Honestly, she looked like she had been through a war inside that tiny room. "Are you okay?"
"Yeah."
She performed some bizarre, over-exaggerated arm motion to free her hands from the confines of the kimono.
"These stupid sleeves! They're too long!"
You couldn't help but chuckle at that. "It's a furisode. Have you never worn one before?"
"I can confidently say I never have."
That answer was stated dauntlessly, like she was telling a joke by saying it. And it was at that moment where you began to feel a tiny twinge of guilt for bringing it up. The fact that she'd never owned a formal kimono pretty much confirmed your suspicion that she was a field hand in the past, and likely grew up in poverty. "I'm sorry." You bowed your head respectfully. "I should have helped you with it."
"Don't worry about it. I'm ready now. I think,"
Zenitsu stated with uncertainty, before making his way down the side staircase behind you. From a distance he heard a rowdy group of people.
"I guess they're already entertaining."
He could make out the sounds of men laughing in a stout and jolly way, as if aided by the inhibition-swallowing effects of sake. The sound of girls giggling was present too, though their joy rang false in his ears. The distortion in it was so pronounced and obvious to him that he was amazed the other gentlemen didn't pick up on it immediately. The true laugh of a lady was something to be treasured, to make an absolute fool out of yourself to bring out. It resounded like the pure chiming of bells, lovely and perfect. He knew he could never settle for this cheap imitation. Zenitsu had never felt like much of a man up until now, but he knew for a fact in that moment that he was a different matter of man entirely than the ones behind that scarlet curtain. What was to become of these disingenuous encounters? The hearts of the ladies who lived in this forbidden world of painted faces and rehearsed authenticity. Would they ever find peace in their future? Genuine happiness? And what's more, would anyone ever know? It was now that Zenitsu noticed you hold up a hand, stopping him just outside the entrance to the viewing room.
"What are we waiting for?"
he asked in hushed tones. He wasn't sure why he whispered, but it just felt like the right thing to do.
"We haven't been called upon yet. When the maidservant signals us, we're to join the company, allowing the other girls to check their appearances and prepare for their performances. We operate in shifts, you see, but the patrons don't know that. They just see flocks of pretty girls coming and going, and it makes them happy."
"Fascinating."
Zenitsu peered through the cracked Fusuma, observing two main tables at the front of the room. A handful of men sat, drinks in hand, facing the small raised stage in a casual manner. One was leaning in very close to a girl far too young for his age, caressing her fingers that were wrapped around her teacup. There were many new faces he had never seen before, and a handful he recognized, in spite of his very short time here. The music being played was coaxing an upbeat sort of mood, a call to action in a way, and he was sure that was intentional. They had a product to sell, after all. The very idea made him sick to his stomach, but suddenly his stomach was dropping for an entirely different reason. You had leaned in close to peek inside too, and now he was standing cheek to cheek with you.
"So close!"
"Watch closely the way she pours the tea. You'll have to do that tomorrow too, Zenko-chan."
You raised a finger and gestured to one of the tables, but Zenitsu couldn't focus on anything besides how nice you smelled. He swallowed deliberately, trying to think of something to say. "Can the guests see us from here?"
"They're set facing the stage, so probably not."
You shrugged, restoring the normal distance between you two, and Zenitsu realized he could breathe again.
"You can relax if you want."
You leaned back against the doorframe, expecting the blonde to do the same.
The first performance just finished, so it might be a little while before we're needed. I'll watch for the signal."
A nod of acknowledgement from your companion, and it was silent once more. Or at least, it should have been silent. There was a sound, coming from down the dim hallway, that kept drawing his attention. It was a vibration, so faint and quiet that he could barely perceive it, like a thunderstorm far in the distance. That feeling you get when you aren't sure if the house is actually rumbling, or if it's just your imagination after hearing the clouds roar. Absent-mindedly, he had followed the sound, stopping where it seemed to be the loudest. Just a short ways around the corner, Zenitsu found himself standing before an elaborate mural, painted on a worn and aged partition to the next room. The painting had an elegant dragon wrapping itself around a bleeding tree. The tree itself looked like it might break in half at the center. It was thin where the trunk should be hardy and girthy, but the roots stretched deep into the ground, and in all directions. The dragon held a sickle in its mouth, and an ornate obi shrouded them both, billowing and stretching far past the mural's natural end. Pieces of the obi extended down the hall, and he wondered how far it went. He planned to investigate that momentarily, but for now another strange observation had him fixated even more. The red paint was less faded than all the other colors by a staggering margin. The rest were melded with the wood, stained pale with years of sunlight, whereas the red was vivid and bright, like it had only been painted yesterday. The red paint had a flowing energy about it, as if the crimson pigment beheld the very lifeblood of the tree. The mural ended at the floor, but to him it felt like the roots were real here, as if these imaginary things had the capacity to tangle him up, uproot the house from its foundation. And in realizing this, he could almost hear the house groan in objection as its turf was disturbed. Those low, steady creaks that wake you up at night, wary of an invader. It's just the wind, you tell yourself. The floorboards resettling. But Zenitsu couldn't shake the sensation of something sinister resting here. The roots on the painted tree seemed motionless, but alive, wriggling and squirming leagues below his feet. He felt queasy, like something inside him was telling him to run. And it was then he noticed his heart was pounding on instinct. But why? Why did this painting make him feel this way? What is this?
"Oh, there you are!"
You jogged up to your companion. Moments ago you had been too busy watching the guests interact that you hadn't seen her wander off. You noticed her eyes transfixed on the composition, and decided to elaborate.
"Oh, that's the Kyogoku House sigil. I'm surprised it's lasted this long, honestly."
When was it painted?
"Over 100 years ago, apparently. An ancient Oiran that lived here painted it. It's said the house prospered because of her prolonged, seemingly endless youth. It's remained the house sigil ever since. So now it's thought to bring good luck and longevity to whoever resides in this room."
Zenitsu was afraid to ask, but he did anyway. Who's in there now?
Obviously, the most profitable lady in the establishment gets the room to herself. And nobody has ever taken this room from Oiran Wara Behime.
Oh.
That being said, we mustn't linger. We don't want to disturb her before she makes her appearance tonight.
And with that, Zenitsu was being dragged away, back towards the bustling noise, soon to be paraded before the strange men, visiting the Okiya.
To be continued.